In the previous lesson, we broke down the core building blocks of Kafka Connect: workers, connectors, and tasks. Now we're going to look at how all of that actually runs in real systems. There are two main deployment modes, standalone and distributed. These modes define how workers operate, how coordination happens, and what level of reliability and scalability you get. In standalone mode, everything runs inside a single worker process. Think of it as one machine doing all the work. That worker runs the connectors, and those connectors internally create and manage tasks. There are no clusters here, just one self-contained runtime. Configuration is loaded from local property files, and offsets are also stored locally on disk, so the worker is fully responsible for both execution and state management. This setup is intentionally simple. You start one process, give it a set of connector configs, it just runs because everything is local. It's very easy to set up and ideal for deployment or quick testing. The downside is reliability. If that single worker process goes down, everything stops. There is no backup worker, no failover, and no automatic recovery. Now in distributed mode, things look very different. Instead of a single worker, you have multiple workers forming a cluster. Each worker can run parts of connectors and their tasks. The workload is split across the cluster. What makes this powerful is that coordination doesn't happen through local files. Instead, workers coordinate through Kafka itself using internal topics. In this setup, Kafka Connect becomes a fully distributed system. Configuration, offsets, and status are all stored in Kafka topics. This means they are replicated, durable, and shared across all workers. If one worker fails, the remaining workers automatically take over its task. The system rebalances itself without manual intervention. This is what makes distributed mode suitable for production workloads. Let's break down the differences in a more structured way. In standalone mode, configuration lives in local file. In distributed mode, configuration is managed through a REST API and stored inside Kafka topic. Offsets in standalone mode are stored locally, while in distributed mode they are stored in Kafka, making them durable and shared. Scalability is also very different. Standalone mode is limited to a single machine, while distributed mode can scale horizontally by adding more workers. And finally, fault tolerance. Standalone is none. Distributed mode automatically handles worker failures through rebalancing. One of the most important features in distributed mode is automatic rebalancing. When a worker fails, the cluster detects that failure through missed heartbeats. Once detected, the remaining workers coordinate through Kafka to redistribute the tasks that are running on the failed worker. Tasks are reassigned to healthy workers and restarted automatically, keeping the system running without manual intervention. To run standalone mode, you start a single worker process and provide both the worker configuration and connector configurations. The worker loads everything at startup and immediately begins processing. There is no external management layer here. Everything is defined upfront in configuration files. In distributed mode, the startup process is split into two steps. First, you start one or more worker processes using a worker configuration file. These workers form a cluster automatically. Then, instead of a local file, you manage connectors through the REST API. You send a request to any worker, and that configuration is stored in Kafka and shared across the cluster. All workers then participate in running the connector task. Choosing between these two modes depends on your environment. Standalone mode is best for development, testing, and simple pipelines where fault tolerance is not critical. Distributed mode is the right choice for production systems where you need scalability, high availability, and automatic recovery. In the next lesson, we'll move into the Kafka Connect REST API and see how distributed mode is managed in practice.